You are listening to the Outside the Boards podcast. I'm Danny O'Leary. For most of my professional career, I have worked in mainstream sports for some of the world's leading sports organizations and properties and blue-chip brands, helping to create award-winning omni-channel marketing campaigns, result-driven sales strategies, and impactful brand-building initiatives. But all that work doesn't compare to the fun, excitement, and challenges I've been fortunate to experience working for the king of all sports, polo. For nearly a decade, I've put my heart and ambition into helping advance the sport of polo. I've made lifelong friendships, met some incredible people, traveled to memorable polo destinations, and heard the craziest stories. My goal is to share these people, places, and stories with you and provide a unique behind-the-scenes perspective of the game that breaks all the common stereotypes, all while discussing key issues affecting the sport today and the constructive sharing of ideas, insights, solutions, and best case studies for the purpose of advancing polo globally. Every week, I will have honest conversations with polo industry leaders, enthusiasts, and awe-inspiring people who make this sport great and fun to be around. I hope through their knowledge and their unique perspectives, they will motivate and inspire you. Together, we will explore ways you can make small tweaks to boost your polo business, whether you are a club, event, team, or player, that will amount to big changes in revenue, participation, attendance, and exposure. Saddle up. Welcome to Outside the Boards with me, Daniel O'Leary. Hi everyone, Danny O'Leary here. We are a few days away from Christmas and hope you got all your Christmas shopping done. We are also a few weeks away from the start of Florida's high goal season at the International Polo Club Palm Beach and Grand Champions Polo Club. Lots of exciting tournaments to look forward to, including 2020 season matches that were postponed due to the pandemic. On this episode of Outside the Boards, we are taking a trip to the Southern Hemisphere and pay a visit to the beautiful country of New Zealand, where we will speak with Simon Wilson. Simon is the founder and managing director of Urban Events, a New Zealand-based company that produces the successful Lexus Urban Polo series of events in New Zealand and the Singapore Urban Polo by FWD Insurance at the beautiful Marina Bay Singapore. I'm excited to welcome Simon on this episode of Outside the Boards to explore the success of grassroots polo events in an urban setting. Simon created Urban Polo with the goal of delivering a quality polo experience both on and off the field that promotes the adrenaline-fueled sport and attractive polo lifestyle to the masses where people work, live, and play. Simon is not only a polo player himself, but a successful business entrepreneur with experience in national and international business ventures in the telecommunications sector and mergers and acquisitions market. Prior to Urban Polo, Simon was the executive director of the New Zealand Polo Open, where he built a large event platform for the sport. He would go on to launch Urban Events in 2016, which completed a successful capital raise in 2018 that helped expand Urban Polo internationally with the first successful Singapore event in 2019. Simon is looking to expand Urban Polo across multiple markets as the brand continues to grow globally, with the mission of increasing the sport's visibility, lifestyle, and ultimately participation. I have had the great pleasure of getting to know Simon and learning more about Urban Polo and its success. Simon has created the right balance between sport and lifestyle by putting on an exceptional product on the field while giving patrons an unforgettable and unique polo experience. He has great vision and thrilled to see him continue to do great things for the sport. I hope to attend an Urban Polo event in the near future. So let's get started, everyone. Enjoy. Simon, I'm so happy that we connected and we were able to do this podcast. I have been very intrigued and a fan of Urban Polo. I think now for the better part of 3 years, I think, when I came across it and just started following you guys on social media. Because as someone who comes from an event marketing and grassroots experiential background, I'm always a fan of bringing concepts like yours to the masses, where normally they might be out of touch or out of reach. So I'm really excited for you to be on this podcast today because I really want to learn more about it and kind of the story behind Urban Polo. And I also know that you have extended experience in working for civic organizations in the areas of tourism as well. I think you used to work for the Auckland Tourism Board. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, it was a contractor's role, and it was all about attracting high net worth individuals to New Zealand.
Okay. Because I'm really intrigued in that because I want to talk about the bridge between, or the importance at least, between organizations such as a polo or polo club working with civic organizations geared toward tourism, and the balance and support that can be obtained there for polo clubs. Because if you're meeting the interest of local tourism boards and supporting the local economy, heads and beds, butts and seats sort of thing, there's kind of a nice balance there. I mean, you look at Chicago, for example. Chicago had to create its own Chicago Sports Commission, and they're huge advocates in bringing major mainstream events to the city of Chicago while also supporting its other properties like the Chicago Cubs, White Sox, Bears, the Chicago Marathon. They're instrumental in bringing the America's Cup, I think, preliminary races here
Yeah.
in Chicago, right off of Navy Pier. They've brought in the NFL draft here. I think they had the NBA draft, as well as a number of NCAA events, so collegiate sports. So I was really excited to see that background because I thought that would add some interesting perspective and encouraging, especially those polo clubs in the United States, as well as events, like really work with your civic organizations because you're offering something incredibly unique beyond just mainstream sports that's going to attract likely a different consumer.
Totally. This is why I see that this is a sport that hasn't been disrupted, that needs to be, in a good way.
So you're from New Zealand. Where in New Zealand are you from?
So I was born in an area of New Zealand called the Rangitikei, which is central North Island. There's two islands in New Zealand. We're in the central part of the North Island. We have a unique naming schedule for our islands. We call them North and South Island.
Okay. And you've lived there your entire life in New Zealand?
Yeah, I have lived abroad, but only for a year at a time. So I haven't settled anywhere. I've lived in England. I've traveled extensively around Europe, Asia. I've been to America a couple of times. So it's nice to be talking to your audience in America.
We love the Kiwis, man. We love you guys down there in your corner of the world, man. So did I say that wrong? You're not a Kiwi, are you?
Yeah, no, that's what people call us, Kiwis. Yeah. It's interesting, there's only 5 million of us, and we live on an island that's the same size as England.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's no one here. So you leave here and go to the rest of the world, and it's just every time I get on a plane, which hasn't been for a while now, obviously, but every time I get on a plane and go somewhere else, I'm just blown away with the number of people that are actually everywhere else, which you guys are used to. So we're tiny. It's pretty cool that people even know about us. We're just a small Pacific island, really.
Well, obviously you're known for your rugby.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your standout.
That's definitely polo's biggest competition down here.
No, because in my prior career, I think it was the Crusaders, which were in Christchurch, was a client of mine. Shout out to that rugby group. That's not professional rugby. Is that just like a step down?
It's professional. Crusaders professional. So Dan Carter is a shareholder of mine. He's one of the most famous Crusaders. He's one of the most famous New Zealand All Blacks.
Uh-huh. Now, is it a feeder system into the All Blacks?
Yeah. So we have a tournament with the Crusaders playing it, which is called the NPC, or the National Provincial Code. And that then feeds into what's called Super Rugby. So the Crusaders are a Super Rugby team. They play against South Africa. They play against Australia, Argentina. Well, they did until this pandemic stopped it.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's the second behind rugby? What's your other popular sports out there?
I mean, obviously soccer is a big sport globally, and I would say soccer is probably the most growing sport in New Zealand. There's a lot of netball that's fairly popular here. Hockey and basketball starting to become popular.
Okay. Is it Auckland? Who's the city of sails?
That's Auckland, and that's our main city. Sort of half the population lives in Auckland.
Okay. Does that mean that New Zealand has a big sailing history?
We're a small island with a coast all the way around it. So if you want to go anywhere, you used to have to get on a boat. So yes. So everyone came here by boat, and you used to have to leave here by boat.
Because I'm a big fan of sailing. So every time I feel like I follow the America's Cup or the Volvo Ocean Race, I feel like I've always seen New Zealand have some pretty big representation.
Yeah, well, the America's Cup's on in March this year. We've just had the preliminary racing happen the last week, called the Christmas Cup. So we've got America's here. So the San Diego Yacht Club have got a syndicate here. We've got England. We've got Prada. So I think that's Spain. I'm not sure where the Prada syndicate comes from, what club. And then we've got Auckland. So we've only got 4 syndicates in the America's Cup this year.
Gotcha. And the boats change too. I know that.
Oh, yeah, they're amazing. They're foiling boats. It's incredible. They can do 105 Ks an hour.
We'll have to do a separate podcast with sailing because I could go into that forever. But we diverted a little bit from polo. But I think the market or demographics might be a little bit of the same. So I'm curious, are you currently a polo player or have been a polo player?
Yeah, so my kind of polo history, I'm definitely not a professional polo player. I made the decision when I was about 10 that I wanted to be an All Black, like every Kiwi boy. And so I went off and chased the rugby dream. I played some representative rugby and then decided that I wasn't ever going to get big enough to be an All Black. So then that was over. So that diverted me away from polo. So my family, my grandfather, he was the first one in our family to play. And so he played 1935 to 59. And I think he was a 3-goaler. Then my father and his brother, so Derek and Charles Wilson, they were a 1-goaler and 2-goaler, and they played between 1950 and 1960 or somewhere around there. So I sort of used to hit around as a kid, but I didn't take up polo at all when I was younger. And then I moved to Auckland in 2000, and I was having a game of one of my very last games of rugby. It was a social rugby match. And one of the guys I was in the scrum with, I stood up and I said, "That's it, I'm done." And we're having a beer afterwards. And I said to him, "What do you do on the weekends when you're not playing rugby?" And he said, "I play polo." And I went, "Great. I've always wanted to get into it. My family used to play it." So I went out that weekend and that's it. I started playing polo. So I played sort of full on for about 15 years, got up to 8 horses, got to 1 goal. And then I've had kids, business. So at the moment, I've tapped it back a bit. I've still got my horses, still got 2 of them left. And I'm sort of hoping to get back into it, but I've got twin 18-month-old girls and a 10-year-old boy. He's had out his first hit. So Ross and Cal Ainsley have got a little polo school just out of Auckland. He's been going out there and having a hit and getting into it. So
wonderful. You hope your little girls will go out there and be polo too?
Yeah, well, whatever they want to do, it's hard to tell them. I'd love to have a polo team between the 4 of us.
Oh, that would be fun. That's something to look forward to. Absolutely. Not a rugby team.
Yeah.
You got a family polo team right there. Perfect.
Correct.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So now, are you currently a 1-goaler still?
Yeah, well, I haven't played properly for 2 years, so I'd hope I'd go down to make it easier.
Now, do you have any siblings?
Yep, so I'm one of 4. No one else rides.
No one else rides. You're the only one. So no one took it up after you. Okay.
I was the only one that got the bug.
Gotcha. And you see yourself in polo for a considerable while, a long time?
Well, my business is polo, so Urban Polo is a full-time job. So I'm constantly talking about it. I wouldn't say that I'm a mad polo nut. That's all I talk about, but it's definitely part of what I do.
Now, what club are you with?
Auckland Polo Club.
And then I think you spent about 8 years with the New Zealand Polo Open. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, probably 7 or 8. I was on the board and we were talking about trying to revive the New Zealand Polo Open and turn it into a big event. And then, as you'll know, you're on a couple of committees. When they're handing out jobs, the best thing you can do is avoid eye contact, which clearly I didn't do. So I had Chris Jones, who's a bit of a legend in polo globally. He used to play in America. Nick Jones and his brother, so his brother Nick Jones and Chris, they played in Florida, pretty sure. They were 5 and 6 goalers between them. And so Chris, he hosted the FIP Polo the year prior to me kicking off the NZ Polo Open. And so I saw what could be done. And we just had to work out how to commercialize it and actually make money out of a polo event. So that's what I did for the club. So I did it on a voluntary basis and raised money for the club.
Okay. And was it successful?
Very. Yeah. The club has rebuilt its clubhouse, completely redone the grounds. Like it's a solid revenue stream, has been for the last 10 years for the club.
Now, how big is the polo community within New Zealand?
It's very small. Maybe 150 players all up, maybe.
Okay. All right. It's about how many we have here in Chicago total.
Right. Bear in mind, there's only 5 million people here.
Yeah. And how many clubs are in New Zealand total?
There's probably about 15 clubs.
Are most of them kind of private fields, or are there more facilities than, let's say, clubs?
Yeah. So predominantly private fields. There's a couple that are club fields, but other than that, mostly private. I mean, we've got 9 polo fields in Auckland, and 2 of them are club fields.
Oh, wow. Okay. How about arena? Are you guys big over there with arena, or is it mostly outdoor?
Not at all. Just outdoor polo. Arena polo doesn't even feature here.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. Not even for starters or beginners?
I mean, everyone's got a round yard
Mm-hmm.
and also an arena for getting confidence up for young players, but no one's really playing indoor arena polo. There's a little bit. There's a place out in Clevedon, which is just out of Auckland. There is an arena out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit, but not really.
So out of Auckland, who are some of the next big clubs that are out there member-wise?
So Christchurch is pretty good. There's the Woods family, which are a really big polo family, and they've got a polo school out there, and they're going pretty well. And there's sort of a bunch of clubs. There's a guy called Pete Dormer who's doing pretty well. He's got his own polo grounds, and he did a polo open day a couple of weeks ago, and he got 35 new people to polo to come in and play, which is pretty exciting. Then we've got the Central North Island. There's 2 really strong clubs in the Central North Island, or 3 actually. There's the Rangitikei, where I'm from. There is Wanstead, which is sort of 2 hours north of that. And then probably another 3 hours north of that, there's a place called Kiki. And that's where John Paul Clarkin plays polo. And JP Clarkin as he's known. He's an 8-goaler, and he's the best we've produced.
Mm-hmm. So you're one of 4 siblings. You caught the polo bug. What attracted you to the sport? What was kind of the bug that hit you that wanted you to continue to play?
For anyone that's not in polo listening, it's not an easy sport to get into, but don't be daunted, because once you do get the bug, it's hard to leave. So very, very addictive. I think that for me, it was easy. I'd ridden as a child and I had that confidence. I didn't go to pony club or anything like that. We just galloped around the hills. So I was used to going fast everywhere and not trying to control the horse, just going for it. So it kind of suited my riding style. Ollie Snelling was the guy that I was playing rugby with. And I went up to the club with him. I rode a few horses, had a knock around, and then a guy called Cody Forsyth, he was a 7-goaler. He knew my grandfather really well. And it was only a week later, and I hadn't played a game. And he said to me, "We've got a game on, we're short a player. Do you want to play?" And I was playing 8-goal polo my first game, which is, looking back, that was a silly thing to do.
I'd imagine it was. Wow.
Yeah. But I just went, this is amazing. I definitely didn't get near a ball, but I certainly traveling around the field and having some fun. So
You played rugby. Do you think that there was a natural progression between you playing rugby and playing polo, whether it be the team aspect of it, kind of the adrenaline? I'm assuming both are very adrenaline-fueled sports.
It's hard to say. I think I had higher expectations of what a club would be like from rugby. So, polo clubs are not necessarily as tight-knit as rugby clubs. You've got 15 of your mates on a field, you're all the same age, and that sort of creates a much tighter bond. Whereas polo, you're playing in a team, but there's a lot of individuals and A-type personalities in polo. So it's not the same, but there's definitely the group of people that you bond with when you're playing. The adrenaline side, that didn't come from rugby. That's just in you. Either you're into adrenaline sports or you're not. And polo is far more adrenaline-based than rugby.
Okay.
Rugby's more of a, you get into it. It's definitely fitness-based, and you've got to be an aggressive style of person to be successful. But polo's, it's like car racing. It's very dangerous, whereas rugby's, not. They class polo as an extreme sport. And when you're galloping on a horse or a pony, you're leaning off and trying to make that last shot just as you come towards the goal. That's a crazy feeling.
That makes me feel good, though. The fact that polo surpasses rugby in New Zealand as more of a brutality sport.
I don't know about brutality, but adrenaline.
Adrenaline, yeah.
I haven't played for the All Blacks, so maybe running out onto a field with 40,000 people cheering would be the same. But the experience of being on a horse is like no other.
So, urban polo. Now, I'm really curious how this kind of all started. Was it your brainchild to do something like this?
Yeah, so what happened was, for the years that I was doing the New Zealand Open, It was more about the event than the sport, the way it came around. There's an old saying that polo's a game you watch over your shoulder. And the reason they say that is because most of the game's played in the other corner from where you're standing.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's 10 acres of field, it's a long way. It's 325 by 170 or something like that, meters, which I don't know what that is in miles, but the size of the field is just problematic for spectators.
Mm-hmm.
And if you understand polo like we do, then it's a beautiful sport to watch because you sort of know what's going on. But for anyone else, it's very difficult to understand the line of the ball from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, one of the things that would help the event that I've created, well, an event that I had with the New Zealand Open, would be to try and get the proximity of the game closer. And how did we do that? Our brainchild really was the urban polo design. So we have a set of boards you'll see in our videos which bring people closer. We've got rid of that dangerous ball that's in polo, and we use a soft style ball that's safe for spectators. And really everything we did, we simplified the rules. We don't change ends at every goal. We change ends at halftime. It's how most other games in the world work. So everyone can understand what's going on and make it a spectator-friendly spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't trying to adjust polo because I don't think there's anything wrong with polo. I think it's an amazing game. So we weren't trying to fix the sport because it doesn't need fixing. It's amazing. But what we're trying to do is create a spectator-friendly event.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the focus. And then there's a whole lot of other things that an event has to compete with nowadays with other events that are on, because you're asking for someone's money, and, you know, Adele might be playing one weekend and Ed Sheeran the next, and then you've got everything else that's going on, and we've got to compete in that market. So we have to create something that's a full event experience. So we have DJs playing at the same time as the polo, and you see a lot of sports, cricket and rugby and tennis have all gone down that path.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a fast 4 tennis game a few years ago, and I was pretty excited about that. And we've actually come up with a new name for the sport that we are playing. So we're calling it Fast 3 Polo, or F3 Polo.
Okay.
And that is to try and recognize that what we're trying to do here is create a spectator-friendly game. And it is different to polo. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're still playing polo, but it's different. You know, the players have to adjust how they play. We've got 3 players on the field, not 4.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a simplified set of rules. We've shortened the chukkers, and everything we're trying to do, because we're so close, we want to promote all of the safety features that we've created, all of the animal welfare things that we want to create, and also protect our players and our audience.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that comes together into what you see at Urban Polo.
Well, and not to mention what you're kind of creating in terms of the Fast 3 element. It's not that far off of what other mainstream sports is trying to do. Like here in the U.S., you know, basketball, for example, well, technically the NBA, I think, has actually a 3-on-3 league. You have football. There is 7-on-7, which is a much more faster game than 11-11 is. You know, it's primarily far more fit people. Even in collegiate sports, there is actually a spring season that revolves around that type of activity. But you wouldn't qualify yourselves as arena, which is also 3x3. Your dimensions of your field, I think, when you described to me in another conversation that we had, almost half of a typical polo field, where it's like, what, 150? What are the dimensions that you guys are running?
It's about 60 meters wide by 150 long.
Mm-hmm.
So half the length, third of the width.
Okay.
And the idea is when you're standing on one side of the field, you can see the polo, but you can see the other people on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So you're all in it together. So it's like an event. So you go to a football event or American football, I think you call it over there. We call it gridiron down here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. But we go to a rugby game here, and part of the beauty of being at an event is you're there together with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can see what other people are doing, people are interested in what everyone else is doing and what everyone else is wearing. And, you know, the Mexican wave is based on the fact that you can see the other side doing it.
Yeah.
So the idea that you're in an event together with other people is what excites people.
Mm-hmm. And you said you cut down the time, of each chukker. How many chukkers are in your matches?
We'll do 4 chukker polos, 4-minute chukkers.
4-minute chukkers. Are you having just one match or a series of matches?
So we have 6 teams at most of our events. It all really depends on access to ponies and players in the area that we're in. But we have 6 teams at most of our events, and we play 4 games
Over the course of the weekend or over one day?
over one day. And what we do is we have a round robin, basically, where the first 3 games are played and there's a winner from that series, depending on your score. And then we have what's called a high goal game. And, we've typically been able to achieve 19 goals over 3 players, which is pretty amazing polo at that level. So Sam Hopkinson, my business partner, he is the professional polo player arm of our business. He is incredibly well connected across polo, and a lot of his mates play at the top end of polo around the world. So that has given us the ability to focus on the game. So when I said before that we tried to create a spectacle that was, spectator friendly, easy to see, easy to follow, but we want it to be a high end sport that, you walk away from it going, wow.
Yeah.
If we had guys like me at one goal playing out there, all one goalers, we have plenty of one goalers playing, but if we had guys out there playing at one goal across the board, then it wouldn't be as exciting as watching an 8-goaler pick the ball up and dance it on the end of their stick and hit it through the goal.
What level of polo are you playing out there?
We're playing 19-goal polo across 3 players.
Oh, wow. Who are some of the pros that are playing out there every season?
Sam Hopkinson, JP Clarkin, Kit Brooks, Johnny Martin, Ross Ainsley. There's some pretty amazing players playing in our polo.
That's fantastic. That's a beautiful thing about urban polo, just from my vantage point, compared to other grassroots programs that are either here in the States or abroad, is that urban polo seems to create a healthy mix between the quality of product that someone is seeing on the field, as well as the lifestyle outside the boards, if you will.
Yeah.
But you're creating an environment where people are there to watch the sport. They're not necessarily distracted by all the hoopla that might be going on the sidelines with popping a champagne and what have you, which is being done, but at the same time, you're creating a viewing experience that you can't turn away from.
Yeah, well, they're there for all of the things.
Some of the other things that I've seen out there, it seems to do, they're focused on one thing and not the other, and not trying to find that balance. And someone who used to work for the governing body, it's important to find that balance, because we're a sport at the end of the day. We are a very competitive, high adrenaline game. And once you see it for that perspective, you're going to fall in love with it. I mean, I've had countless people from my previous life in mainstream sports who have gone to a polo match in IPC and their mouths are dropped. They're the biggest fan in the world right there and then. And they wonder how the hell the sport is not getting the credit that it deserves.
We never want to see this to be a gimmick. We're not trying to recreate polo, but we have come up with our own version of the game. There's nothing wrong with polo. I love it. But I think that being a bona fide sport, that is one of the reasons why our large sponsors are with us. We've got FWD Insurance in Singapore. They're a large insurer of Asia. Their ethos in business is all about the new way of insurance and how they approach the market. And they like the fact that we have created this new high adrenaline sport that people can access now. And we take it to the middle of the city as well. In Singapore, we're right in the Marina Bay. So it's right in the middle of, that tiny little island, and right in the middle of 3.5 million people.
Don't you have that famous building that looks over you?
Oh, the Marina Bay Sands,
yeah,
which is a casino. That building has 2,500 rooms. It's incredible. And 10,000 people working on the floor at any one time.
Oh, my gosh.
It's incredible. But we sit below not only the Marina Bay Sands, we look down the avenue straight into the middle of all of the main business sector of Singapore. It's a really exciting place to showcase polo. The Singapore Polo Club actually feels like an urban venue anyway, but Singaporeans think it's a long way out. It's a 15-minute drive in a taxi to the club. So the club's really in town, but we do it right in the middle of town. So that is really the essence of urban polo. We take it out of the rural setting. We put it in a space where it looks out of place and it's something new and exciting and accessible for a market that don't have access to this game. Polo happens all over New Zealand, all over the world, and it happens in silence. No one knows it's there.
Yeah.
in New Zealand and some of our other events we're looking to grow into, we have Lexus on board, and Lexus's whole mantra is experience amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the Urban Polo is an experience like no other. There is nothing like we're doing.
Yeah.
And so they see that as exciting, adrenaline, and experience something amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we are creating. I watch people watch our event, and it excites me that they're watching the game. They're not watching the game all day, but that excites me that they're watching the game, because that was one of the frustrations of a large polo event. They can't watch the game.
Yeah.
Even if they want to. It's too big. So it's exciting to see what is happening with the sport. And also it's great that the players love playing in it. It's really nice for these guys that play high-end polo that maybe never get a chance to play in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
The reality is there's only a few proper polo events in the world that attract the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, you play on private land with just the family and friends watching.
This podcast episode is presented by Global Polo TV. The world's premier destination for video on-demand polo content has arrived. Now you can watch the nation's best live and archive tournament matches and compelling behind-the-scenes content from anywhere at any time and on any digital device. Global Polo TV has over 9,000 subscribers, 200 plus hours of live broadcasted games, and over 500 hours of produced content from weekly shows to in-depth features. Sign up today. All on-demand polo games and content are free. Want to watch official USPA games live? Then get your Polo Pass today by visiting globalpolo.com so as not to miss this year's high goal season and upcoming 2021 Gauntlet of Polo. Welcome to Global Polo TV.
So when you guys started this 5 or 6 years ago, did you just have one event? Was that it?
We did 4 events our first year.
4 events your first year. Now, did it just immediately take off, just kind of unexpectedly?
I knew it was going to work, and my experience in events, I knew how to market it. So we got it out there. But yes, it took off. It's interesting enough. After the first year, everyone went, wow, this is incredible. We want to go back again. And it's just steadily growing. It grew quickly the second year, and then it's just been steady growth since then in spectator numbers. And we've come up with new ways of selling the day and, just modifying what we do. But essentially, it's the same as when we started it.
And did you have a lot of full support from the general New Zealand polo community?
We have to work with polo players. So Sam, my business partner, has these relationships that, he can pick up the phone and call most people in polo. So you have to work with the polo community.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they support the event. And because they love playing in it, you watch some of these guys come off the field and they're so excited because spectators are right there. And to be playing polo right there, you can high-five the spectators. So you're engaging with what's going on. So it's a two-way street here. The players are enjoying it as much as the spectators are.
And the polo community has benefited from it, not just from an exposure, bringing attention to the sport, but also you guys are driving participation as well.
Yep. It's a long game, but that's what we hope. That little thing that Pete Dormer in the South Island did couple of weeks ago where he got 35 new players into the event. We were part of that, so we helped promote that for him.
Mm-hmm.
We've been involved in donating a saddle to the up-and-coming player in Christchurch. Obviously, the players get paid for doing what they do at our events.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like they'd get paid in England or the big Argentinian matches or in Florida. Obviously, there's big money down there, but the dream is to create a global series here and try and create a league. But it's on the radar, but it's going to take some time. And obviously, COVID-19 hasn't helped us.
No.
Slowed everything down.
Well, ironically, the size and space of pole that occurs on a typical outdoor field has been advantageous to us. And even for spectators as well, not just for playing the sport. You get to space everyone out.
Right.
I know we had success out here in Chicago with it. I'm assuming that during your event, you're educating your spectators about the sport. How can you get involved and so on. What are some of those things that you're doing to kind of promote, to potentially drive people to take a lesson or two?
Really, you just have to sort of tell them. We do it over social media, communicate them via our email database. But just one-on-one personally is probably the best way to convert someone into polo. So some of the things that you know are not going to be helpful for a new polo player is if they don't have enough income or right demographic to get into that, because it's bloody expensive. You know, you need to be able to afford to support your polo addiction, because that's what it is. I know when I'm talking to people that, you know, that they're perfect to give it a go. So we've had a lot of one-on-one conversations with people. You know, when someone books a marquee at our event, there's one person paying the ticket for 100 people.
Yeah.
So you've got someone in that. And if they want to start playing polo, or their kids want to start playing polo, you know that it's perfect because they can carry on.
And you just said, I think previously, you had about 35 people jump into the sport this past year or the year before.
That was just at one event. We had 35 new entrants. I don't know if they're going to start playing polo. We'll see what the conversion rate is. But we've had lots of people joining out of our Auckland and Christchurch areas. And then obviously Singapore, we've only done one event in Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we had to postpone our February event this year. But one event we had in Singapore, you know, the interest we drove there, even though the polo club in Singapore is basically in the middle of town, no one knows there's polo in Singapore.
Yeah.
You know, there's just no profile for the sport there. And so we got, I think, about 3,000 people to the event. And the feedback I've had is I had no idea that there was polo in Singapore.
Do you know any numbers as to what may have come out of it in terms of potential new players or lessons? No?
No, I've got no idea. But I know that there's huge interest in the club.
Mm-hmm.
Singapore is an interesting place. You know, you don't hang out at a bar really in Singapore. You join clubs. So the Singapore Polo Club has a members club as well. So, you know, there's been a huge amount of crossover between our sponsors and the clubs. And we've got a great relationships with the guys at the club. Satinder Gautra, he's the president of the club, and he's great to deal with. They're so passionate about their sport. It's a difficult place to play polo.
Mm-hmm.
They've only got one field. So for them to do tournaments all the time, it's difficult. So, you know, it's amazing. And they play all year round.
Yeah.
And the relationship we've got with the players up there is fantastic. There's some such great people up there.
Have the polo clubs in New Zealand, not from a participant, but even from a spectator, have they seen their numbers rise if they're hosting public events?
It's really hard to know because, you know, we don't get that data.
Oh, okay.
But anecdotally, I know that people are joined or jumping on board.
I got to assume that there's got to be a little boost there. You know, oh my gosh, we have this in New Zealand. You know, oh, it's about an hour's drive outside the city, but oh my gosh, I want to go.
So Ross Ainsley, he started his club a few years ago just south of Auckland, and they're having open days constantly, and we're feeding people into those open days. It's not an easy sport to get into,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also expensive to stay in it.
Yeah.
You know, so you need to make sure that if you're going to jump into polo, that the addiction's coming, be careful,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to support your addiction.
Well, I got to applaud you guys. I mean, your metrics about 35 people, you obviously need to see what the conversion rate is there, but that, you know, that's over 20% of your existing player base.
Yeah.
Getting half of that would be impressive for the sport.
Getting 3 players is a big deal for us, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it just goes to show that the method in which you're communicating the sport to is working. And hopefully that's an indicator to other clubs and other areas throughout the world that, hey, you know, grassroots polo is something to invest in if it's working. But obviously it needs to be done right. Like I said before, there are other people that are doing it, but they're not creating that balance like you have. They might be primarily focused, let's say, on the lifestyle too much. And then the sport is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the event.
Well, it's definitely not the case for us, you know, and Sam will never let that happen. He is 100% focused on keeping the quality of the polo up.
And I think that's critical, the fact that you have someone with those deep-rooted polo connections to make sure that there's a healthy relationship between what you're doing and the rest of the polo community and making them feel involved and invested into it. Now, when did you guys expand to Singapore?
In our 3rd year, I think we went up to Singapore. We basically looked at the map and went, right, we want to go somewhere and make a splash. We want to get this idea out to the rest of the world. And then the next step is to take on a bunch of areas. We felt like we're at a point where we had the model really easy to replicate. So I looked at a map and went, right, then there's a couple of things between Singapore and New Zealand. So we've got a free trade agreement with Singapore. I've got a permanent visa if I want to go up to Singapore. So it just meant that business was going to be easy up there.
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't regulatory easy to get to Singapore. We set up a company up there, and we set up a company because we want to roll polo across the rest of Asia. And to do that, we need to be able to ticket locally. And the local ticketing arms up there require you to have a local bank account. The only way to get a local bank account is have a company.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so we went down that process. That was the hardest part of setting up.
Did you have to work in hand with Singapore's government right through their local club and say, hey, let's do this together?
First of all, we signed an agreement with the polo club in Singapore to say that this is, essentially we're going to work together. And then once we had that locked in, then we went off to the government. You know what? Everyone was easy to deal with. The only thing that was difficult was the set up the company and the bank. They were difficult processes because they need to know the money laundering is obviously a big deal up in Singapore. So they need to make sure that you're bona fide. And so we had to jump through a whole lot of hoops, and it's just a time thing. But, I do events all over New Zealand, and then I've got this one in Singapore. And to give you like a direct comparison of how, once you're in the system, how easy it is to do business in Singapore. In New Zealand, a liquor license can take anywhere between maybe 4 months, 6 months at the worst. You have to go through a bunch of regulatory hoops, huge documentation, and there's some cost, a few $100, maybe $1,000 to do that. In Singapore, it's a 15-minute exercise, and it's $12.50 Singaporean.
Oh, wow.
And you do it on your phone. Incredible. Once you're in the system, it's just so easy.
Has their government been really well receptive to this event?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're great. They love events. Singapore their whole economy is based on tourism, basically, whether it's financial tourism, where you've got, people working there, or the other thing interesting about Singapore is a lot of the expatriates that live there are really only there for a couple of years. So you've got this huge transient population that they come there, they want to see cool stuff, and then they're off. And then also the Singapore government's got a huge focus on its locals now. So they're really trying to educate and bring all their locals up to a point where they can take over that role. And then you've obviously got the Chinese influence in Singapore, which is huge. So it's great. They loved our event. They're easy to deal with. We have a relationship, and that's important.
Now, do you guys have the same reception in New Zealand from those cities?
So it's very different across different areas. Auckland, it's been harder to get a good venue, but now we've got the best venue in, I think, the country. We play in the Auckland Domain, which is it's held by the New Zealand government, and it's regulated on how many events are allowed there. And we're one of them. So we're quite privileged to be one of them. And it's a beautiful venue. It's actually an old crater, a volcanic crater.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, which is grassed over. Maybe it's the only place in the world they play polo in a volcanic crater.
Dormant, I'm hoping.
It's very dormant. So we're not gonna have those problems. Auckland's got 27 dormant volcanoes.
Did you encounter, when you were developing, any sort of major issues in terms of your rollout? Were any hurdles or anything that you can recall that were difficult?
Everyone's got a view on damage profile that horses are going to do. In reality, it's not as much as people think. You have to make sure, if you're going to be doing this sort of thing, that you really know what you're doing and you can articulate that to local authorities. And we're in that position. I've been doing this for, between the New Zealand Polo Open and Urban Polo, I've been doing this for 12 years now. And over that time, we've got to a point where we've got a lot of credibility, a lot of run rate behind us. And obviously, I wouldn't be going for 12 years if we were getting it wrong.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be difficult to start this without that. All of the things that make events successful are the history of the event. So it's very difficult just to invent and start an event. But when you've got content, so we've got, unlimited content now of our event, we can show people exactly what they're going to experience when they go. I always say to my staff that you can't sell a secret. We're not a secret. You guys are hearing about us in America, which is exciting. And one of the goals is we'd love to be in America and come and show you what we do.
And the nice thing is you establish a lot of trust with your local government or those people who operate those public venues. Up here in Illinois, it's kind of the same way. What is the damage profile going to be with a bunch of horses running onto it when in actuality it's not that severe?
That is right, but you have to be able to prove that.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Like once you'd have and you have developed that trust over a long time, like, all right, now this thing is working. It's good for us. It's good for them.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that's happening in New Zealand, our two main events are Auckland and Christchurch. Auckland's the biggest city. Christchurch is the second biggest city. Quite a lot smaller, but still quite an affluent city. We're getting a lot of people that are booking at both events.
Mm-hmm.
They're an hour and a half flight away from each other.
Okay.
So, you have to come and stay for the weekend. And that's great for the local governments in New Zealand because we're getting people coming to stay. They're booking at high-end hotels. They're doing stuff while they're there. So it's great for tourism, domestic tourism, which that's all we're getting at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And for the foreseeable future, that's, it's going to be locked down for a while. But then we've got Singapore as part of what we're doing. And as we roll out to the rest of the world, I think we're going to see people wanting to come to New Zealand and come and see what we're doing.
Now, obviously, you want to expand. You want to expand into the U.S. and other markets. Outside of the U.S., what other markets would you hope to expand to?
So our focus is Asia, US, Middle East.
Okay. And is there anything that you want to expand as the event itself? Do you envision potentially live streaming your events or anything like that in the future? I mean, what are some of the bells and whistles that you ultimately want to attach for your spectators?
I mean, the first probably thing is extend it in areas where there's a higher population base into more of a 2-day, 3-day event.
Yeah.
That would be the first goals. Live streaming, we've given it a go, live streaming polo. I think that the event, we do a good job on capturing what happens at the event, but polo is interesting. The people that watch polo on TV are polo enthusiasts.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there's too many people outside polo watching what, Argentina's doing a job of covering the event and filming it. And one of the downsides to filming polo is the drone seems to take the speed out of the game and it doesn't look as fast as what it actually is and as exciting as it is. So it's not an easy sport to cover because of the sides of the field and to follow what's going on. So, I think live streaming the event, we are working with Tourism New Zealand at the moment on telling a story about our event and what we're doing. So watch the space. But I think that it's more the event as part of the polo that's exciting for people to watch.
Who are some of your sponsors outside of you? Lexus is your biggest one. That's your title sponsor.
Lexus and FWD Insurance are our two major sponsors. Obviously, as part of the event side of it, not the polo side of it, but part of the event side of it, you have food and you have alcohol, and they are a type of sponsors that you get on board. So Perrier-Jouet, champagne, Peroni beer. We've got insurance companies. They're part of what we do. So we also have local partnerships in each area. So you have a local hotel that you partner with. So in Singapore, that's the St. Regis, which is a beautiful 5-star hotel. And in Christchurch, we've got Hotel Montreal. We've got partnerships with media companies. So NZME is the New Zealand media company. The brand they use is Viva, which is a local high-end magazine. Jaeger-LeCoultre, which is a watch brand. One of our oldest and dearest sponsors is a company called Rod and Gun. They're actually in America now. And they're a clothing brand. They provide us with all of our uniforms, and they're also a team sponsor. So we've worked with Heineken. We've worked with loads of international brands to bring the event alive. So it's anything that's logical. These brands want to access our clientele. They're the type of sponsors we get.
And your event just recently won an award too, doesn't it?
Yep. We've had awards for Sports Event of the Year and that sort of stuff. It was a couple of years ago. So, yeah, we're getting recognised. I think the most exciting thing is you guys up in America noticing us. Oh, it's cool.
No, that's for sure. Now, going back to tourism, you have experience under contract working with Auckland Tourism. How important is it for an event or, let's say, a polo club that invites spectators to work with their local tourism board, bureau, committee, organization, what have you?
Yeah, so there's two things. There's funding available from these places. So you have to sort of prove to these local authorities that you are adding some commercial value, but also it's really important when you're operating on public space or public land.
Yeah.
You need to be on board and working with these guys. it's not anyone's land, it's everyone's land. And you have to make sure that you respect the rules around the property, but also work with them so they know that the reason that you're getting that piece of land and not another event is a worthwhile endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the keys, the fact that we are promoting the sport and keeping the quality of the sport up is really important because of that. Because if it was just a gimmick, then they may have a lesser view of it, I think.
Okay. Given your experience in polo with Urban Polo, playing the game, watching the game, if you were to think of another sport that polo best emulates as potentially a business from a spectator experience, who do you think that might be?
I think a really good fit for the polo audience is the same profile, demographic profile would be tennis.
Okay.
One of the challenges of tennis is obviously no one's tried to change the size of the court,
Mm-hmm.
but I think one of the challenges of tennis is you can't speak between games.
Okay.
You've got companies hosting their clients at tennis, and every second moment you're talking, you have to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the fast four tennis model, it hasn't really taken off, but I think it's a cool model, because it's got music playing the whole time and it's completely relaxed. The players are talking to you, got players mic'd up, and they're talking to you while they're playing. I think that's a new endeavour. We love cricket down here in New Zealand. I don't think America's got cricket. Well, you might have it, but it's not a big sport there.
It's trying.
It's trying, yeah. Well, we love cricket here, and that's done a great job converting it. They've got a thing called 2020, and so the guys get to come out and just hit 6 runs, hit it over the boundary. It's a very exciting sport.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we are doing a similar service to our sport and promoting it in an exciting way, but trying to stay as loyal to polo as we can.
What do you tell people who have not experienced polo? What do you tell them the experience that they're going to get from watching this?
So overwhelming is a word I use quite a lot. I've watched people come to our event and be overwhelmed by how the grandeur of a horse. There's a lot of people that have never seen a horse, and they come to this event and suddenly they are in the middle of a polo game.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people literally come to tears with how amazing it is.
Yeah.
Standing on the side of the field. And that's, if someone wants to understand what they can experience at the event, that would be the first thing. And obviously it's a full event. So you're listening to fantastic music. There's beautiful food. People get dressed up. I had a girl speak to me a few years ago about the period of time it takes her to get ready for polo, my polo event, which I thought was quite exciting. And this wasn't hours, this is months. She was colour matching months out, which I don't understand it as a guy. We don't understand that, but she was picking her outfit months out before the event and thinking about it and what she was going to wear and what she was going, what handbag she was going to have. And what a great thing. There's not that many events these days where you get dressed up for.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. It's a nice part of our event that, the guys make an effort, which is fantastic. I don't know what generally dress sense in the States is like, but I always look to Europe. I was invited by Prada to go out on the America's Cup boat last week, not the boat, but one of those super yachts, and watch the sailing that's been happening down here. And, just to see the amazing outfits they're wearing and how they're getting dressed up. So getting dressed up and eating beautiful food and experiencing a lovely day out with your friends,
Mm-hmm.
but also having this overwhelming experience where you get to see horses, it's pretty exciting.
And not to mention, the attire, I think, is relatively universal. I mean, I've seen pictures on your website like, yeah, that's what it is over here. That's for sure. And I love hearing that people are figuring out what they're going to wear. We do hear that. I think I get maybe, I swear, 50 phone calls every single season. And most of them are for female asking, what is the attire?
Yeah.
And first and foremost, I usually tell them, look, it's a long afternoon, dress comfortable. If you want to come in flip-flops and board shorts, you're more than welcome to. But if you want to experience that lifestyle and feel like you're at the Kentucky Derby, then by all means, take out the wedges, your sundress, and your big hat and have a ball.
Just to be clear, flip-flops and jandals won't cut it.
Did you cut it? Okay. Usually at our events, it's those who kind of buy the general admission ticket and roll out a blanket kind of thing. It's usually our VIP guests that are dressing to the nines. That's for sure.
Across the board, they're all dressed up. Yeah. You won't be getting in We call them jandals here. Flip-flops, you won't be getting in those. It's funny, a few years ago, I had a government official turn up in Crocs. Do you know what they are?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah. And I said, you can't come in.
No, that's even worse than a sandal, man.
Yeah.
Now you're wearing Swiss cheese. Yeah.
She said to me, I have to come in on the landowner. And I said, I don't care. You're not coming. Get dressed up.
Yeah. So has COVID affected your future plans this year or next?
Yeah. We're on hold. Yeah.
You're on hold?
Yeah.
When do you guys plan on getting back to normal again?
Well, when the world decides to get back to normal, then we get back to normal. We've got a lot of plans for what we're doing around the world, but COVID, until we can be secure, event organizers take a huge risk rolling out events. Yeah. And we're even in that situation here in New Zealand at the moment. We don't have COVID in New Zealand, and we haven't had for months. Our borders are completely locked down. We've still got people pouring into the country, all returning Kiwis, and they're coming in, but they have to be quarantined for 2 weeks. If that gets through the border and we have to lock down, we know what happens, and the government here makes the decision, and within 12 hours of an outbreak, they lock it down.
Yeah.
The biggest risk that we have is event build. If we're in the event build process and the government locks it down, then the only person paying the bill is us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's risky. So until we can get some security around that, the rest of the world is going to have to wait. The conversation we're going to be having, I think, with Tourism New Zealand is, look at what we're doing here in New Zealand. We're free to move around. We miss you. We love you. We can't wait to see you again. Mm-hmm. That story, basically.
Quick question, and going back to the tourism. Now, when you go to like Singapore, or if you're planning on going to another continent or country, would you see that you have the support of New Zealand's tourism? So, because I'm assuming they have offices in other countries throughout the entire world.
Yeah. When we went to Singapore, we worked with Tourism New Zealand up there.
Okay. That's something that we've noticed success here. Usually when we have exhibition matches, I know when we have Jamaica or India, those local, if they had offices in Chicago or within that region, they're definitely supporting and sponsoring, and vice versa as well, when we reciprocated the offer and went to those countries and play.
Yeah, there's an arm of New Zealand tourism called New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, and they, or NZTE, and the NZTE team up in Singapore were great.
Excellent. Well, hey, Simon, I really appreciate you coming and joining me today. I learned a lot, and I'm truly excited for you guys and your expansion opportunities and your vision for the future for Urban Polo. I think you guys have something incredibly unique. And me coming from a world of experiential and grassroots marketing, especially on the brand side, can really make a difference and really promote and drive awareness to the masses than maybe what Polo has before, where it's very isolated. It's in the western suburbs. It's in rural destinations where we're bringing it into the heart and bringing it to the masses. And I'm assuming that a lot of your spectators that are coming are of the younger demographic as well, which I think is also important for our sport as well when we're looking for that next generation of player.
Yeah. It's definitely opening a new window to a new market.
Yeah. So kudos to all the hard work that you do, man. I hope you guys get back to normal. I'm excited to see your expansion efforts. I think you guys really have something special here, and I think it's fantastic for the sport. And yeah, man, I'm glad you came on board. I hope it's early in the morning over there from where it is right here.
Yep, it's early in the morning. And look, thanks for listening to us. And look, I hope that everything settles down up in the US. We're all thinking of you guys and what you're going through up there. And obviously all of our other friends around the world that are experiencing this pandemic. In New Zealand, we're very lucky that we're a small little island and we can contain what's happening, but we feel for everyone that's been affected by this, and we really hope that this can be over ASAP so we can come and see you.
Absolutely. Likewise. I need to get down to the other half of the world. That's for sure.
Totally.
I have a buddy of mine who's a big skier down there, and that spends his winters in New Zealand, or I should say his summers in New Zealand.
Yeah, your summer. Yeah.
My summer. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent, Simon. Well, until the next time we chat, stay safe and healthy down there, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel.
This podcast episode is presented by Global Polo TV. The world's premier destination for video on-demand polo content has arrived. Now you can watch the nation's best live and archive tournament matches and compelling behind-the-scenes content from anywhere at any time and on any digital device. Global Polo TV has over 9,000 subscribers, 200 plus hours of live broadcasted games, and over 500 hours of produced content from weekly shows to in-depth features. Sign up today. All on-demand polo games and content are free. Want to watch official USPA games live? Then get your Polo Pass today by visiting globalpolo.com so as not to miss this year's high goal season and upcoming 2021 Gauntlet of Polo. Welcome to Global Polo TV. Now we have reached the part of the show where we address outside the board's issues affecting the sport of polo, with the sharing of insights, ideas, and best practices towards solving everyday marketing, branding, and sponsorship problems, avoiding bad habits, or helping to navigate through new trends and how to best leverage those opportunities. Hi everyone. On this episode for Insights, I want to talk a little bit about the Polo magazine. I know most of you have Polo magazines that are out there, or brochures, or programs, if you will, depending upon the size of your club and what have you. So this topic came about because I'm going through the process of developing my magazine for our upcoming season. And I want to go over a part of the magazine that I think that every single polo club should have. And it's something that, you know, as we progressed from our first magazine, which was probably only 2 pages, has now expanded to 5. And I swear next year it's going to expand to 10. And that area of the magazine, it talks about our sport specifically, or a polo primer, a polopedia, educating people about the polo. There are a number of names you could possibly call this section. In fact, it's the section of the magazine that I'm probably most proud of and I'm most excited to read because it is a visual and educational representation of our sport. And I enjoy it. I love reading it, and majority of the questions I get when I'm at a polo event is people are asking me tons of questions as it relates to how a match is played, what happens in the event of a penalty, how the penalty has occurred. People can't really see that from the sideline. Best way to educate people is obviously through your magazine, and this is a critical area of anyone's magazine and should require a lot of attention to detail and to make it as visual as you can and not make it essentially too wordy. There's a number of areas within this that I would strongly encourage polo clubs to do. So I just kind of want to walk through them with you. So one, what we call it in our magazine, is pretty much a spectator's guide. And within spectator's guide, there's a number of different other elements. So within that spectator's guide, obviously we want to talk about the sport in terms of educating about key polo terms and essentially what they mean. But if you can apply those terms in terms of some visual representation of the sport or graphic, it better educates people, because people visualize things intrinsically. They need a visual representation. They need to see it for themselves. You can't just explain it to them. And given the fact that we operate on such a huge polo pitch, it's far more difficult for people to kind of grasp. And when people say, oh, it's kind of like hockey, well, even hockey, no offense, is a very difficult sport to follow because it's so fast-paced moving that a lot of the times you don't know what a call is or why things were done or why the ref blew a whistle and what have you. So with the spectator's guide, you're talking about a lot of things. You know, the right of way, the line of the ball, what a dangerous cross is, crossing and penalty shots and the different penalties that are around it, what a ride-off is, what hooking is, a polo field, and giving people a visual display of a polo field, as well as how big a polo field is, and using modeling off of or mirroring other sports. So in the case of a polo field, you're showing, hey, this is 9 football fields, and here's the size of a football field within a 9-acre pitch. A goal, how many points can be achieved, or how many points can be achieved in a penalty shot. What is made up of a polo team? 4 players. What does each position stand for? 1, 2, 3, and 4. And where do they typically play on the field? Or how does a play translate, and what are the responsibilities of each player? What a chucker is. Again, a chucker is basically a period as if it's in basketball, or a quarter as if it's in football. All those types of details are very, very important. Again, if you can provide a visual representation, all the more better. Another area to expand on within the sport is the player and pony. And this kind of goes to the technical side of our sport when it comes to the equipment, all the way down to the polo pony. What type of polo pony? What breed of polo pony? How big is the polo pony? What are the skill sets of a polo pony should have to play this particular sport? What are the equipment that a polo pony wears, from the saddle to its reins to the horseshoe it wears, depending upon the environment that it's in? All those types of details, and expanding upon that to obviously the player, the boots, the pads, the helmet, the sunglasses, even the gloves, and the little tiny little details on the gloves, such as their padding on every single knuckle. And obviously down to the mallet. What is a mallet? What is it made out of? How long is a mallet? What is the history behind the mallet? Those types of things. Going beyond that is explaining to people about the score sheet, of how that's represented and how to follow a score sheet, even including a score sheet for people to try to score and match themselves. You see a lot of this in baseball. If you ever get a baseball program at a professional baseball game, you'll see in the back that you have the ability to score your own game, and people continue to do that to this day. I grew up doing it because, one, it made me pay more attention to the game in itself, but educating people about how that works is very, very important. And people want to understand this. People want to be an expert in things that they're not pertinent to, because in all honesty, when you're sitting in front of a conversation with family and you're to spew out all these polo terms, you become the fascination or the hit of the party. So the score sheet is very important. Another aspect of it that we always thought was nice to see was humanizing the horses. Now, you talked about a little bit about the idea of showing the different technical side of the polo pony, its skills, and so on and so forth, but also at the same time, humanizing the polo ponies even further. For example, if you know who the participating teams are, or if there is a major team that you're focusing on. In the case of Oakbrook, we had the Oakbrook Polo team. So that essentially gives precedent in our magazine. So what we do in that aspect is we actually show people headshots of every single string of each one of our players and educate them as to the age, the color, the sex, any awards or accolades the polo pony might have, that sort of thing. So people are actually in tune to the polo pony that they're riding in addition to the player. Again, this is a very, very critical area. It's probably the most area that I'm excited about in my own magazine, because it continues to get better and better. And we constantly see other examples in other sports in terms of how they display and educate people about their own sport. And usually the most technical, more complicated the sport is, you're going to see the best portrayal and education of that sport. A good example would be yacht racing and the Volvo Ocean Race or the America's Cup, and the level of detail that they walk people through to better understand their sport. In other sports, obviously, there's a lot of equipment involved, from football to hockey, and even some of the more, I don't want to say obscure sports, but kind of lesser known, field hockey, cricket, all those types of things. What are they used for? Help me understand the scoring, and so on and so forth. And people are going to be grateful of that. You almost want this to be an encyclopedia in some way about the sport. Or if you had the vision of creating your book, use that as an example of how you want to walk people through. This is the one area that people are the most fascinated about when we have our magazine. Yes, we do stories. Yes, we do sponsor features, and so on and so forth. But this area of the magazine is what people gravitate the most to. And this is also the area that people are going to spend the most time looking through. Every single time I do my walk around of our polo field and I see someone walking the magazine, I almost see them all the time within a certain number of pages educating themselves as to about this sport and using it almost as a key as the sport occurs and is played on the field. So again, if you're creating your own magazine, this is an area that I strongly stress for you to pay a lot of attention. Again, a visual representation is the best in addition to editorial and explaining it. But if you can visualize it, the better. Again, ours keeps on expanding. We're getting to the point where we're actually creating custom graphics in order to best portrayal and best visualize people as to how the game is played, what people wear, the technical side of the game, and so on and so forth. So again, something I encourage was top of mind as I'm going through my own magazine, and it's something if you guys are developing your own magazines right now, looking forward to the summer season, I strongly encourage you to put a large emphasis on this. It's a great way to educate your fans. It's also potentially sponsorable, especially those brands that are more endemic to our sport. So again, highly encouraged. So I hope you walk away with something there, everyone, and expand that area of your magazine So there you go. Food for thought, everyone. Enjoy. That was a great episode. What is the one thing you learned from today's conversation? If this episode had an impact on you in some way, then I encourage you to visit and subscribe to our website at OutsideTheBoards.com for more episodes and interviews with incredible guests. Thanks for stopping by, my friends, and hope to see you on the polo field.